The wind carved its way through the trees like a whisper carrying old sins. Snow had not yet begun to fall, but it hung in the air, heavy and still, like a breath held too long. A gray sky slouched low over the mountains and the pines groaned. Under their own silence, she came through the forest, dragging a rope over her shoulder, tied to a tattered sack filled with rough-cut wood. Her boots were cracked, her knuckles raw. Her uniform, what was left of it, was soaked in patches from creek water and melted frost. She moved with the stubborn rhythm of someone who didn't know if she'd see tomorrow, but was still prepared to build a fire for it. Her face was streaked with soot and dried tears. But it was her eyes blinking, distant, that gave her away. They weren't looking at the trail. They were looking behind it. As though her footsteps weren't hers, but borrowed. And behind the tree line, hidden behind an old splintered cabin built before the war, a man watched. He didn't flinch. Just stood in the shadows, smoke curling from the cigarette pinched in his cracked fingers. His coat was patched at the elbow, wool faded, stitched with the thread of quiet years and too many winters. His name was Eli Rourke, and he had built this cabin nail by nail after the fire took his wife. After the army took everything else. Inside the house, a boy sat cross-legged by the hearth, silent, rubbing two rocks together out of habit more than hope. Silas hadn't spoken since the final shelling of Brightridge, when the field hospital turned to smoke and ash, and the world forgot how to explain things to children. Eli's gaze flicked between the soldier and the boy. The woman's knees buckled once as she hit a rise in the slope. The sack of wood tilted, catching on a root. She didn't stop, just adjusted the rope across her shoulder and leaned harder into the pull, and then she fell. Not stumbled, fell, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. She didn't move. Eli exhaled smoke and said nothing, but the boy moved. Without a word, Silas stepped toward the door and opened it. The wind swept in like a scolding breath, cold, sharp. Eli didn't stop him. He just watched the child cross the snow and kneel beside her. Watched him press a hand to her arm and tilt his head like he used to with sick birds and dying fawns. Then the boy looked back at him. That look was all it took. Eli threw the cigarette into the dirt and moved. She was burning up despite the cold. Her breath came in shallow gasps, skin pale beneath grime and bruises. Her fingers clutched the rope even as she lost consciousness. Eli carried her in. She didn't weigh much. Just bones and defiance wrapped in a soldier's skin. By the time she stirred again, hours had passed. The fire cracked softly. Rain tapped the roof now instead of snow winter arguing with itself above their heads. She tried to sit up, eyes wild, hand reaching for something she'd long since lost. Eli didn't move from his chair. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You can sleep." Her eyes found his. Storm gray, bloodshot. "You're not from here," she rasped. He shook his head once. "Neither are you." Silence. Then she looked down at her side and saw that her sack of firewood was now stacked neatly beside the hearth. She blinked. The boy sat on the floor again, sketching into the ash with a stick. "I didn't mean to come this far," she murmured. "Just needed the wood. Wasn't going to take it." "You earned it," Eli said. She nodded slowly. Then her voice dropped to a whisper, soft and broken like a violin left too long in the rain. "Do you have a cellar?" Eli didn't answer. "Right away, I do." "If they find me, if they come, don't let them near the boy." He narrowed his eyes slightly. "Who's coming?" But she had already closed her eyes, that night. As the wind picked up and the trees leaned in closer, Eli sat by the fire, watching the shadows crawl across her face. Her uniform bore no name, her boots bore no country, just the remnants of something once proud, now buried under mud and tears. She cried in her sleep, silent at first, like a child trying not to wake a drunken father, then louder. She murmured names that weren't hers, places that no longer existed. And one name she whispered over and over like a prayer, Ellie. Eli frowned. He hadn't heard that name in years. By dawn the rain turned to snow. The forest wore it like a shroud, muffling every sound except the wind. The woman woke slowly, refusing food, taking only water. She sat near the door, always looking south. Eli didn't ask questions. He just mended the fence, sharpened the axe, kept the fire alive, but that afternoon, he stepped into the room holding a tin cup of boiled oats and paused at the doorway. She was braiding Silas's hair. The boy sat perfectly still, eyes half-lidded, face serene for the first time in weeks. Her fingers moved gently, instinctively, as if she had done this 100 times. Each braid was tight, purposeful. When she finished, she patted his shoulder. Silas looked at her, then reached into the pocket of his corduroy coat and pulled something out, a folded piece of torn cloth. He held it out. She opened it. It was a patch, old, frayed, but unmistakable. A faded insignia from the 113th Infantry. Her breath caught. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Barely above a whisper, the boy pointed to a shelf. Eli's face darkened. "It was my wife's," he said. "She served. Field medic. Bright Ridge." The woman looked like she'd been struck in the chest. "I was there," she said. Eli froze. "She died there," he added, voice flat. "In the second blast." The soldier's eyes filled not with tears, but memory. "Heavy, haunted. She saved 3 children before it hit," the woman whispered. "The last one. She pushed me over him, covered us both. I tried." Her voice broke. Eli stared at her. For the first time, his jaw trembled. The fire popped between them. Silas looked from one adult to the other, then stood and walked over to the firewood stack. He picked up a small piece and set it on the flames. It caught quickly, sending sparks upward like fleeing ghosts. Eli cleared his throat. "You got a name?" She hesitated, then answered. Nora, just you out there." Again hesitation. "I'm all that's left." Eli nodded once, then turned and walked to the door. Before stepping outside, he paused. "There's a second cot. You can take it." She didn't thank him. She just reached down, touched the patch again, and folded it carefully back into the boy's hand. That night, Eli stood outside, staring into the snow-covered trees, listening to the wind whistle. Through the bones of the forest. Inside. The fire burned low. And for the first time in years, Silas whispered a word in his sleep. It wasn't his mother's name. It was hers. The storm moved in without ceremony. Not thunder. Not lightning. Just snow, thick and relentless, swallowing sound and color until the world became a breathless painting in black, white, and ghost gray. Days blurred into each other, measured, not by sunrises, but by the dwindling pile of firewood and the deeper creak in the cabin's timbers. Eli didn't say much, but then again, he never had. He kept busy, cutting kindling, mending a hinge, rubbing oil into the stock of his rifle. Like it was a sacred relic? His silence wasn't cold, only old, the kind forged in battlefields and funeral parlors. The kind of silence that had its own weight. Nora understood it. She didn't fill it. She moved inside it. She'd wake before the boy, wrap her boots in cloth, and step barefoot onto the snow-slick porch to breathe the air. She built fires faster than Eli could chop. Her hands, calloused and precise, made traps from twine and pine needles. She fixed a draft in the roof with nothing but a rusted nail and part of her sleeve. And when Silas coughed in the night, it was her voice that eased him, soft humming, words in a language neither Eli nor the boy recognized. One morning, Eli found her kneeling at the edge of the creek behind the cabin. Snow dusted her shoulders. Her coat hung open. She was scrubbing something, a sleeve, a patch, maybe just memory in the frigid water, her hands red and shaking. She didn't see him. Or she didn't care. He watched a long moment, then turned away. That night. They ate quietly, boiled potatoes and thin venison stew. Silas sat close to the fire, drawing again in the ash with his finger. Eli sharpened the blade, eyes flicking now and then toward Nora. "Someone's been through here," he said finally, not looking up. "Tracks near the tree line," she stilled. "Horse?" Asterisk, no. Boots, 3 sets, heavy, military gait? She didn't ask how he could tell, just reached for her coat. Asterisk, you planning to run in that storm? He asked. Asterisk, I don't run, she said quietly. I disappear. Asterisk, he looked at her, then really looked. At the way her shoulders stayed square even when her eyes wavered. At the way her jaw tightened when she reached for the coat with the torn collar. I could have turned you in, he said. You still could. Asterisk, could have taken the bounty. She froze. How much? Asterisk, 700 dead or alive. Silas glanced up from the ash drawing. Eli tossed another log on. The fire, asterisk, not nearly enough. Asterisk, Nora didn't reply. Just sat down and folded her hands in her lap like she was in a church pew waiting for absolution that never came. Asterisk, later that night she took first watch. Eli didn't ask her to. She just did. Asterisk, he woke sometime after midnight and saw her silhouetted against the frosted window, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the trees like a ghost from another war. He lay back down without a word. She didn't sleep till dawn. Asterisk, the next day, they found the first sign of blood, a small smear on the tree near the creek, human, fresh. Then, later, hoof prints, asterisk, and a patch of cloth snagged on a low branch. Black, with half a brass button still hanging, military issue, Confederation post-war elite. Not law. Not justice. Mercenaries. Nora went quiet. Eli didn't press her, asterisk, but that night, she placed something on the table when the boy had gone to sleep. A folded piece of newspaper, old, yellowed, fragile, asterisk. On one side, a photograph, a group of soldiers standing in front of a burning orphanage. On the back, a child's drawing. Tucked between the crease, crayon, shaky, a stick figure woman with a long braid holding 2 children by the hand, asterisk. Nora looked up at Eli, asterisk. I was part of the 8th Mobile Med, tasked to extract non-combatants after the border fell. But our orders changed. Eli's jaw tightened. We were told to burn it, leave no trace, no survivors, but there were children. 17 of them hiding in a root cellar. Asterisk, her eyes flicked to the fire. Then to Silas, asleep beside it. Asterisk, I got 8 of them out. The rest, I buried. Asterisk, command didn't see it that way. Asterisk, they called it desertion. Sighed, I left my unit to save traitor offspring. You didn't, Eli said flatly. I didn't follow orders. She replied. They sat in silence. Snow creaked on the roof like bones shifting. Asterisk, who drew that? Eli asked finally, nodding at the picture. Asterisk, my brother's daughter. Ellie, Eli looked up sharply. She died in Brightridge. Nora nodded slowly. Same day as your wife. Something cracked in the space between them. Not the firewood, something older, deeper. I was there. Nora said again, voice barely above breath, your wife. She gave me a name to remember, told me to find you. But I was on the run. I couldn't come back, asterisk. Eli stood slowly. Pushed away from the table. Asterisk, you remember the name? Asterisk, Eli Rourke. He's too stubborn to die, she said. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, his breath caught, not from smoke, from something heavier, hope. Asterisk, 2 nights later. The rider came, asterisk, they heard the hooves first, slow, deliberate, a beast that didn't fear wolves or men. Then the silhouette appeared on the ridge, long coat flapping, wide hat pulled low. He didn't dismount. Just watched the cabin with a stillness that made the snowflakes seem frantic, asterisk. Eli cocked his rifle and handed the boy a tin plate, asterisk, go. To the cellar. Asterisk, Silas hesitated. Then looked at Nora. She nodded once. The boy vanished. Asterisk, Eli stepped onto the porch. Shotgun held low, just enough to say what needed saying. The rider didn't speak for a long time. Then, asterisk, she inside? Eli said nothing. I know she is. Eli's voice came cold. You got a name? Asterisk. Name don't matter. I got papers, signed, stamped, authorization to detain and deliver. Asterisk, bounty hunter. Asterisk, better than most, smarter than the rest. Asterisk, Eli nodded, then fired. not at him, but at the tree beside his horse. Bark exploded. The rider flinched. The horse reared. Eli's voice didn't rise. Just turn sharp. You come back here again, I won't miss. The man pulled the reins hard. You think she's a hero? She ain't. She burned a building with wounded inside. She saved children. She chose traitors over country. Eli stepped off the porch. No, he said. She chose people over orders. Same as my wife. The rider spat in the snow and turned. As his horse carried him off into the trees, his voice echoed back like a curse. She ain't done running. Eli watched until the hoofbeats vanished, then went inside. Nora was standing by the window. Hands clenched. I'll leave in the morning, she said. You won't make it far. I've made it this far. He stepped closer. My wife trusted you. That's good enough for me. She shook her head. You don't know what they'll do to anyone who helps me. I do. She looked up. Eli's voice dropped. I don't care. They didn't speak after that, but something passed between them. Something not born of words. Something woven from firelight and shared scars and the quiet ache of the almost forgiven. That night, Silas curled up against Nora without a sound. And for the first time since the shelling, he slept without twitching. Outside. The wind whispered through the pines like a voice that had watched too. Many wars and too many winters. It said nothing, but it listened and it waited. The dawn broke in silence. No birdsong. No rustle of thawing trees. Just pale light spilling across the snow like the breath of something ancient and watching. Smoke coiled from the cabin chimney, thin and steady. Inside, the fire burned low. Eli sat by the window, sharpening the same knife he'd sharpened every morning since the war ended and his own never did. Nora stood behind him. Arms crossed, her silhouette rimmed in gold light. She hadn't slept. Neither had he. The boy still dozed beneath the heavy quilt, one hand curled near his face, his braid loose from the night's turning. Eli spoke without turning. He'll come back. I know, she said. You still leaving? She didn't answer right away. I was, she said finally. But he'll hunt you if I do, let him try. She stepped forward and sat across from him. You shouldn't have to choose. I already did. They said nothing more. The moment held, long enough to hurt. Then passed. When the knock came, 3 slow raps against the frozen door. Neither flinched. Eli rose, checked the rifle. Handed a small revolver to Nora. She didn't ask where. He got it. The boy stirred. Nora crouched beside him. Brushing hair from his forehead. Remember the root tunnel behind the cellar, she whispered. The one that leads to the stream? He nodded, eyes wide. You go there if I say *, his lip quivered. But he nodded again, the knock came once more. Slower this time, not a request. A reminder. Eli opened the door. The bounty man stood. There, dusted in frost and silence. Behind him, 3 more. Mercenaries, ragtag but ruthless, 2-bore rifles. The third, a torch. Nora stepped into the doorway behind Eli. The man smiled. There she is. Your mistake, Eli said. The man tilted his head. Don't do this, Rourke. You got a kid. Let her go. Take the bounty. Start over. I already did. The gunman motioned with his chin. Then this ends now. What followed happened in seconds. Nora ducked left, diving behind the hearth. Eli stepped forward and fired. 1 merc went down, shoulder torn. The one with the torch threw it toward the cabin roof. It missed. The boy, already in the cellar, pulled the trapdoor shut. Gunfire thundered. The cabin shook. Eli fired again. Then fell back, blood painting his sleeve. A round had caught his shoulder. Nora screamed his name and returned fire from behind the table, shooting low. Her bullet tore through a man's leg. He howled and fell, face first into the snow. Then came the silence. Just one left. The bounty. Man, Nora rose. He was already inside, rifle raised, breath fogging the air. She lowered her gun. You want me? She said, Here I am. He hesitated. Just long enough, Eli from the floor pulled his second revolver, one shot. The man's chest jerked back once. Then again he dropped. Hard, it was over. Except it wasn't. Smoke curled in lazy spirals through the open doorway. Blood steamed against melting snow. Silas crawled from the cellar, face pale but dry-eyed, and ran straight to Eli. The man winced. Still on his knees. "I'm fine," he lied. The boy reached into his coat and pulled out a strip of cloth, one of Nora's makeshift bandages, and pressed it to the wound. Eli ruffled his hair. "You did good," he said softly. Outside, Nora dragged one of the bodies clear, breathing hard. When she returned, soot on her cheek and eyes rimmed red, Eli looked at her long and quiet. "You could go now," he said. "Nobody left to chase you," she nodded. "Could." "But you won't." She shook her head. He studied her. "Why?" She crouched beside him and opened her coat. From an inside pocket she pulled something wrapped in waxed paper, folded, worn, protected. A letter, his name on the front. In her handwriting, his wife's. Eli stared at it. "She wrote it before Brightridge," Nora whispered. "Gave it to me when she pushed me over," the boy said. "If I made it out, find you." His hands trembled as he took it. She looked away. "I couldn't face you? Not then? Not until I saw the boy?" Eli unfolded the letter. The ink was faint, but her voice rang loud in every word. "If you're reading this, Eli, I didn't make it, but someone did. Someone who deserved. 2. You always said you trusted people more than orders. I hope you still do. Keep Silas safe. Forgive yourself. And maybe open the door one more time. Love you, always." He read it 3 times, then a 4th, then folded it and placed it in the inside pocket of his coat. Nora was crying. Now, no sound. Just the kind of tears that made it hard to breathe. Silas crawled into her lap. She froze, then held him. He didn't resist. When he finally spoke, his voice was cracked, uncertain, a bird testing old wings. "Mama?" She gasped. Eli looked away and smiled. The snows melted a week later. They buried the dead in a quiet patch behind the cabin, stones unmarked. Nora carved something into the bark of a pine with her knife. A name, her sister's child. A promise kept. They never spoke about the bounty again. Eli kept the letter in his coat. Silas spoke now. Not much, but enough to ask for stories. Enough to say good night. Enough to call Nora Mama in whispers when the wind howled. Sometimes. Nora walked the trail with the boy beside her, showing him where the snares were hidden. Sometimes Eli stood on the porch and watched them go, rifle in hand, peace settling over him like fresh snow. She never wore the uniform again, but she kept the patch, folded, inside her pocket, like a scar she'd chosen to live with, not run from. If you stood outside that cabin today, all you'd hear is wind. All you'd see are trees leaning toward each other like old soldiers swapping stories. The woodpile is full, the roof is strong, and the smoke still curls from the chimney. Inside lives a father who loved once and lost once and learned how to do both again. Inside lives a woman who carried the war in her chest and laid it down in the arms of a boy who called her Mama. Inside lives a boy who found his voice in the silence, not because someone gave it to him, but because someone stayed.